Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Harry Potter fans often joke that Harry didn't survive thanks to skill, but thanks to plot armor. Luck, fortune, coincidence, call it what you will. It's especially strange when you remember he stood against Tom Riddle himself, the most powerful dark wizard whose followers were dangerous, fully grown, and expertly trained in magic. Even Harry himself admitted more than once that he was just lucky. He was never a genius like Dumbledore or gifted from childhood like Voldemort. And yet, he won against all odds. Today I'm going to tell you about the real reasons Harry Potter was able to defeat Voldemort. Trust me, it's not as simple as it seems. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Harry's friends and allies were the true source of his luck. Strip away the magic and prophecies, and Harry's victory becomes a story of people. He was never alone, not in a single crucial battle. He was surrounded by loyal, strong, and devoted individuals without whom he never would have succeeded. Hermione Granger, the walking encyclopedia of Hogwarts, repeatedly saved Harry and Ron with her knowledge and wit. Remember Philosopher's Stone? Her logic led them to the right potion. In Deathly Hallows, she was ready for everything. Her bottomless bag held everything needed to survive. Ron Weasley, Harry's emotional anchor. Sure, he had moments of doubt, jealousy, and anger, but he always came back. He pulled Harry from icy water, destroyed Horcruxes, and cracked jokes when life seemed to lose all color. Albus Dumbledore, the architect of victory. His plans, letters, will, fairy tales, and carefully chosen objects worked even after his death. He gave Harry exactly what he needed, Severus Snape, the tragic hero. His love for Lily Potter was the reason he protected Harry his entire life. In the end, he passed on the most crucial information, the key that changed the course of the final battle. And let's not forget the entire army of allies, the Order of the Phoenix, the professors, the students, each of them contributed to the final victory. Number 2. Harry's enemies often helped him, unintentionally. Sometimes Harry's enemies made it easier for him to win. Voldemort, despite all his power, made poor decisions, and his followers often added chaos to the mix. Severus Snape, as a double agent, sabotaged Voldemort's plans from within. Not for Harry, but for Lily. That was his strength. Peter Pettigrew had one moment of weakness. He couldn't kill Harry at Malfoy Manor due to a magical life debt. That moment gave them a chance to escape. Lucius Malfoy slipped Tom Riddle's diary into Ginny's book, unaware that he was destroying the first Horcrux. His constant efforts to impress Voldemort exposed many of their plots. And of course, Draco Malfoy. When Harry disarmed him in Half-Blood Prince, neither knew he had just claimed ownership of the Elder Wand, but in the finale that detail became everything. Number 3, by sheer luck, Harry came to possess all 3 Hallows. For centuries, wizards searched for just one Deathly Hallow. Harry ended up with all 3 by accident. The invisibility cloak was a family heirloom passed down from his father. Harry inherited it simply by birthright. The Resurrection Stone was hidden inside a snitch that Dumbledore left for him. And the Elder Wand, that's a tale of its own. Its allegiance goes to whoever defeats its previous master. When Draco disarmed Dumbledore, he unknowingly became its owner. Then Harry defeated Draco, also unknowingly, and with that he gained control over the most powerful wand in existence. In the end, this wand refused to obey Voldemort, giving Harry the edge he needed, and all of it a chain of coincidences. Number 4, Harry became the chosen one only because Voldemort made it so. The prophecy was ambiguous. It spoke of a boy born at the end of July whose parents had defied the Dark Lord 3 times. That described 2 boys, Harry Potter and Neville Longbottom. Voldemort chose Harry, and by doing so made him the chosen one on his own. Perhaps because Harry was a half-blood like himself, perhaps because he underestimated Lily's love. But that single choice set everything in motion. Had Voldemort ignored the prophecy, none of it would have happened. but he created his own destroyer. Number 5. Harry survived Avada Kedavra multiple times. Through luck, the killing curse leaves no survivors, yet Harry lived multiple times. The first night, when Lily shielded him with her life, ancient sacrificial magic took effect. Voldemort, sparing Lily at Snape's request, gave her the chance to protect her son, and in doing so, doomed himself. Later, when he returned in Goblet of Fire, their wands triggered priori incantatem, a rare magical reaction. A fluke? Maybe, but Harry survived. In the finale, he faces Avada again, and again survives. Why? Because Voldemort unwittingly destroyed a piece of his own soul inside Harry, because Harry was a Horcrux, because the Elder Wand refused to kill its true master. All of it, a sequence of accidents held together by luck. Number 6. Harry was always in the right place at the right time. How many times did Harry just happen to be at the center of key events? Too many for it to be just coincidence. He learns about the stone just as Quirrell is about to steal it. He discovers the Chamber of Secrets just as Ginny is dying. He witnesses Voldemort's return. He finds the right memories. He sneaks into the Ministry, into Gringotts, into Hogwarts, always at the perfect moment. He even dies at the right time to destroy the Horcrux within, and returns, not because he wanted glory, but because he was where he was needed. Number 7. Protected by the love and sacrifice of others. Lily Potter's love didn't fade with death. It lived inside Harry. It burned into his skin the night she stepped between him and the killing curse. She gave her life for you, Dumbledore told him. That kind of act leaves a mark. Voldemort never understood it. He saw it as weakness. But that single moment of sacrifice made Harry untouchable. Literally. When Quirrell tried to seize him in Philosopher's Stone, his skin blistered. Because evil couldn't bear to touch something so purely protected by love. Years later, Harry gave that same protection to others. He walked into the Forbidden Forest and let Voldemort kill him. "I'm ready to die," he whispered, not for revenge, but to keep his friends safe. That act, like Lily's, created magic stronger than any curse. It spread through Hogwarts. When Voldemort cast spells during the final battle, they faltered. People fought harder. He'd tried to break them. But Harry's sacrifice held them together. He wasn't alone. The love of Sirius, Dumbledore, Lupin, even Fred, stood with him. They had died for a cause. Harry lived for it. Number 8. Voldemort's arrogance made him vulnerable. Voldemort believed he was untouchable. He saw death as a weakness, love as a joke, and other wizards as inferior. That pride blinded him. He created Horcruxes, not 1, but 7, convinced no one would ever find them. No one else would have dared, he boasted. And yet, teenagers destroyed them, one by one. The diary, the locket, the cup, the diadem, each one shattered because Voldemort never imagined anyone smart enough or brave enough to look. By the time he realized what was happening, it was already too late. His arrogance cost him more than just objects. When he used Harry's blood to restore his body in Goblet of Fire, he believed it was clever. "I can touch you now," he sneered. But he didn't understand what he was taking. The blood carried Lily's protection. By using it, Voldemort anchored that love magic into his own body. And when he killed Harry in the forest, that magic kept the boy alive. He gave Harry a second chance with his own hands. That's not power. That's a mistake born of ego. Number 9, intuition and courage over knowledge. Harry wasn't the smartest. He wasn't the most skilled. But he trusted his gut. Again and again, that instinct saved him. In Goblet of Fire, he didn't outwit the maze. He felt his way through it. When Fleur screamed, he ran toward the sound. When he saw Cedric trapped, he helped him. When the cup shimmered, something told him it was wrong. But he touched it anyway, ready to face whatever was coming. That wasn't logic. That was courage wrapped in instinct. The same courage led him into the forbidden forest. No one told him to go. Dumbledore didn't ask it, but Harry knew. "I have to die," he whispered to Neville, handing him the sword of Gryffindor. He walked through the trees alone, the snitch clutched in his hand. "I am about to die," he said, and the resurrection stone opened. His parents walked beside him, not to fight, just to give him strength. His mind didn't lead him there. His heart did. Even in battle, Harry trusted feelings over plans. When he faced Voldemort in the Great Hall, he didn't attack. He waited, listened, watched the wand. "It's mine," he said quietly. "It answers to me." He knew that not because of a book or a spell, but because it felt true, and it was. Voldemort cast the killing curse. Harry cast Expelliarmus. One fell, the other stood. Not because he knew more, but because he believed. Number 10. Harry's wand had a will of its own. Wands choose the wizard, but Harry's wand did more than choose. It protected him. In Goblet of Fire, when Harry and Voldemort duelled in the graveyard, something impossible happened. Their wands locked, gold light connected them, and ghosts appeared. His parents, Cedric, even Frank Bryce. "Hold on, Harry," his father whispered. That moment, known as priori incantatem, wasn't a trick. It was the wand's will. It gave Harry the seconds he needed to grab the portkey and escape. No spell in the world could have done that for him. In Deathly Hallows it happened again. Voldemort's curse struck during the flight from Privet Drive, but Harry's wand turned back and shattered the attacking wand with blue flame. He didn't cast anything, the wand acted alone. Even Ollivander couldn't explain it. "Such things are not supposed to happen," he admitted in disbelief. The phoenix feather inside Fawkes, Dumbledore's bird, had recognized its twin, Voldemort's wand, and it had chosen to fight for its master, with or without permission. That loyalty saved Harry more than once. When he later used Draco's wand, it felt wrong in his hand, foreign, untrustworthy, but his own wand, that wand fought beside him like a friend. Without it, he would have died in the sky. He would have died in the graveyard. Magic isn't just spells and chants. Sometimes it's a bond. And Harry's wand was bound to him by something stronger than incantations: loyalty. Number 11. He was underestimated and overlooked. Voldemort never saw Harry as an equal. He saw a boy who survived by luck, a teenager with a scar, not someone capable of unraveling dark magic crafted by the most feared wizard in a century. That arrogance gave Harry an edge. "The boy is nothing," Voldemort once hissed in Deathly Hallows. "He will not understand the significance of what he finds." But Harry did understand. And while Voldemort mocked Dumbledore's faith in the boy, that same faith allowed Harry to move through the shadows, unnoticed, unguarded, and underestimated. No one expected 3 teenagers to dismantle a dark empire, not Bellatrix, not Lucius, not even Snape, until he saw the truth in Dumbledore's plan. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione began their hunt for Horcruxes, Voldemort was blind to it. He never thought to protect them, never imagined anyone could find them. The locket in the cave, the cup in Bellatrix's vault, the diadem in Hogwarts, all hidden but not unreachable. Voldemort never bothered to check. That was his fatal mistake. He never thought they'd be hunted, Harry told the others. He thought no one would dare. Because of this, Harry moved freely. The trio camped, planned, and infiltrated the Ministry, Gringotts, and Hogwarts itself without Voldemort realizing what they were doing until it was too late. Even the final blow, the Elder Wand turning on its master, happened because Voldemort had misread loyalty, misread power, misread the boy he tried to kill. Harry didn't win by brute strength. He won because he was never seen coming. Number 12. He was driven by morals, not power. Voldemort wanted control. Harry wanted peace. That was the difference. Tom Riddle feared death, craved power, and saw love as a weakness. Harry feared losing people, craved protection for others, and saw love as strength. When Dumbledore asked Harry in Half-Blood Prince why he kept fighting, Harry said simply, "I don't care," when asked about prophecy. "You are forgetting the prophecy," Dumbledore warned. Harry replied, "You did not hear the prophecy. You don't know what it said." His voice trembled with emotion. "It doesn't matter, because I've got something worth fighting for." That was all the difference in the world. Harry never wanted glory, even in Goblet of Fire. When his name came out of the cup, he protested. "I didn't put my name in," he told Dumbledore. "You've got to believe me." He didn't want fame. He didn't want people staring. He just wanted to survive and to protect the people he loved. That's why students followed him. That's why Dobby gave his life for him. That's why Ron came back after leaving. They didn't follow a general. They followed a friend. Voldemort ruled through terror. He threatened Draco's family. He punished failure. He killed on a whim. Even his closest allies, Bellatrix, Lucius, Wormtail, Witherham, lived in fear. When the final battle began at Hogwarts, he offered mercy to those who would surrender Harry. He thought loyalty could be bought with safety, but he was wrong. Nobody handed Harry over, not even the Slytherins. And when Neville stood before him with the Sorting Hat in flames, Voldemort saw what he'd never understand. Courage, not born of fear, but of belief. Harry never cast the killing curse. Not once. Even in the last duel, he used Expelliarmus. "You're the one who is weak," he told Voldemort. "You'll never know love or friendship." Voldemort laughed and died alone. Harry, surrounded by those he saved, didn't take the Elder Wand for power. He broke it, snapped it in half, tossed it away, because he never wanted to rule. He only wanted it to be over. And that's why he won, number 13, a unique psychic connection to Voldemort. Harry Potter shared something far more dangerous with Lord Voldemort than just a prophecy. Deep inside him, a fragment of Voldemort's soul lived, planted there on the night his parents died. This piece made Harry unknowingly a Horcrux, binding their fates together. It wasn't just a magical tether, it was a living channel between two minds. That's why Harry often saw into Voldemort's thoughts. He felt his rage, his fear, his triumph. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry dreams of being the snake that attacks Arthur Weasley. He watches it happen through Voldemort's eyes. "He's got Arthur!" Harry gasps, waking up covered in sweat. "He's got him in the Department of Mysteries!" No one else had such access, not even Dumbledore. The connection haunted Harry. Visions came uninvited, like ghosts crawling into his sleep. He saw flashes of places he'd never been, dark forests, distant castles, long hallways of death. In Half-Blood Prince, Voldemort's hunt for the Elder Wand flares in Harry's mind as a burning obsession. But this curse was also a weapon. Voldemort believed he was the only hunter. He didn't know that his prey could watch him back. Every time Harry tapped into the link, he saw more pieces of the puzzle. Every feeling of triumph from Voldemort told him another Horcrux was secure. Every flicker of fear meant something had been lost. In Deathly Hallows, the link becomes the map that leads Harry to his final victory. Through it, he tracks Voldemort's journey across the country, visiting the Gaunt Shack, breaking into Gringotts, guarding the final Horcrux at Hogwarts. The connection becomes unbearable, but Harry endures it because it's the only advantage they have left. As the final battle looms, he understands something Voldemort never does. The connection isn't just magical, it's human. "You're the one who is weak," Harry says. "You will never know love or friendship, and I feel sorry for you." These words aren't spells, but they hurt Voldemort more than magic ever could. Had the link never existed, Voldemort might have won. The snake would have struck, and the prey would never see it coming. But fate, or perhaps some deeper magic, gave Harry a window into darkness and the courage to stare into it. The pain nearly broke him, but the insight saved them all. Number 14. Staying true to himself in every situation. In the ever-shifting world of magic, where loyalties bend and fear corrupts the heart, Harry Potter stood like a stone in the river. Everything around him changed. People turned, alliances broke, even Hogwarts itself trembled under dark clouds. But Harry remained true to the one thing that mattered most, his inner compass. It was not a loud thing nor heroic in the way stories often portray. It was quiet, determined, and persistent. He did not crave glory. He never sought power. And even when vengeance whispered its sweet promise in his ear, he turned away. That was the difference. That was his greatest strength. When he believed Sirius Black had betrayed his parents and condemned them to death, Harry was given the perfect excuse for vengeance. He was only 13, filled with grief and rage, yet when the truth unraveled, he did not let fury consume him. He did not strike out blindly, even before he knew everything. He hesitated. And once he learned Sirius was innocent, Harry didn't seek someone else to blame. He absorbed the pain and carried on. In a world obsessed with retribution, Harry chose to forgive. It was not weakness, it was an act of supreme strength that few at that age or any age could muster. Years later, he stood in the shrieking shack, wand in hand, face to face with Peter Pettigrew, the man who truly betrayed his parents, the man whose cowardice led to James and Lily's death. It would have been easy, even justifiable, to end him. But Harry did not take the bait. "I don't reckon my dad would have wanted them to become killers," he said, restraining Sirius and Remus. It wasn't mercy for Pettigrew, it was loyalty to a principle, a refusal to let hatred take root in his soul. It's one thing to show kindness to a friend, it's another to spare the life of the man who destroyed your childhood, but Harry always chose what was right, not what was easy. Even in his darkest hours, Harry never betrayed himself. When Dolores Umbridge poisoned the very heart of Hogwarts with cruelty and lies, when she tortured students and silenced truth, Harry did not resort to the same tools she used. He resisted her tyranny with honesty and courage. He formed Dumbledore's army not as a weapon of rebellion, but as a haven for those who still believed in the light. He taught others not to fight with rage, but with resolve. The world was collapsing around them, yet Harry's core remained unshaken. He never became what he hated. Tom Riddle, in contrast, had no core. He was a collection of masks stitched together by ambition and fear. As Voldemort, he sought control over everything, death, people, truth itself. His entire life was a desperate attempt to escape weakness, to bury the frightened orphan boy inside him. But Harry never denied his own vulnerability. He didn't pretend to be fearless, he simply acted in spite of fear. Where Voldemort demanded obedience, Harry inspired loyalty. Where Voldemort feared death, Harry accepted it. That was the great chasm between them. One built a tower of bones to feel invincible. The other walked through fire with bare feet, trusting in who he was. During the battle of the Department of Mysteries, Sirius fell through the veil, and Harry was consumed with pain. He had every reason to hate Bellatrix Lestrange, who laughed as she fled. He pursued her, wand shaking in his fist, but even then, when hatred burned through his veins, he could not cast the Cruciatus curse properly. Bellatrix mocked him for it. "You need to really want to cause pain, to enjoy it. Righteous anger won't hurt me for long." And she was right. Harry couldn't torture, not even her, because the part of him that would have made it possible did not exist. As Dumbledore revealed the weight of prophecy, as he spoke of power the Dark Lord knows not, it became clear that love wasn't just an abstract idea, it was Harry's shield. But that love wasn't naive or passive, it was active and resilient. It was what made him protect Draco Malfoy, even after the boy nearly killed him. It was why he didn't expose Snape's past after the war, despite the bitterness that still lingered. It was why he could look at the mirror of Erist and understand that the image of his parents wasn't meant to trap him but to remind him who he was. The moment that defined everything came after Voldemort was defeated. The Elder Wand, the most powerful wand ever crafted, lay in Harry's hands. It responded to him. It was his by right and by power. He could have done anything, become anything. The world at last was his to command, but Harry did not keep it. He repaired his own wand and returned the Elder Wand to Dumbledore's tomb. "If I die a natural death like Ignotus, its power will be broken," he said. He knew that legacy was not forged through domination, but through restraint. That the most powerful choice was to walk away. Many would have been tempted. Many had been tempted. Dumbledore himself confessed his fear of the wand and what it could make him. "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living and, above all, those who live without love." These words were not philosophical musings. They were confessions. Dumbledore had lived without love once and paid the price. Harry learned from his mistakes and avoided the same path. He refused the throne that awaited him because he had no interest in ruling. He wanted only to live, to love, and to remember those he had lost. Number 15. Learning from mistakes, not just books. Harry Potter never won because he was the most talented. He didn't breeze through Hogwarts like Tom Riddle once had, collecting awards and admiration from every corner. He didn't master spells in seconds or charm professors into bending the rules. He wasn't the kind of student who knew the answer before the question was asked. In fact, Harry often stumbled through school, barely passing subjects like potions, struggling with occlumency, and frequently ending up in detention. But where Voldemort had brilliance, Harry had something deeper, an ability to grow. What set him apart wasn't intellect, but insight. It wasn't raw, magical power, but the quiet, stubborn determination to learn not only from books, but from life's hardest blows. When Harry first entered the wizarding world, he was wide-eyed and utterly naive. He trusted quickly, perhaps too quickly. That trust nearly cost him everything. The betrayal of Peter Pettigrew, his parents' old friend, someone he'd never even met but whose name was once spoken in the same breath as loyalty, was a scar that never fully healed. Peter's treachery forced Harry to learn that loyalty isn't always obvious, and sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who will destroy you. Yet even in that moment, when Sirius and Remus stood ready to kill Peter, Harry stopped them. "I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it for you," he said, not realizing then that this decision would ripple forward, that sparing Pettigrew would bind him to a life debt and later, in a moment of silence and hesitation, help Harry survive. He learned, through pain, that mercy wasn't weakness. It was foresight. Harry's ability to absorb pain and reshape it into meaning didn't stop with Pettigrew. The loss of Cedric Diggory during the Triwizard Tournament carved another line into his soul. He'd been tricked, used, and watched another boy die simply for standing next to him. "Kill the spare," Voldemort had said. Just like that, a life ended. That summer, Harry returned to Privet Drive not as a hero, but as a boy crushed by the weight of a death he couldn't prevent. Yet what did he do? He didn't retreat into bitterness. Instead, he became sharper, more vigilant. He paid attention. He began questioning the adult world more critically, realizing that the Ministry was not infallible and that truth had to be defended even when the world denied it. Cedric's death didn't make him cold, it made him awake. In the 5th year, Harry's world darkened further. Sirius Black, the closest thing he had to a father, was lost to him forever. The Department of Mysteries became a place of ghosts. He had ignored warnings, believed in visions, and dragged his friends into danger. And when the spell hit Sirius and he fell through the veil, Harry was left staring into nothingness, screaming into a void that offered no answers. It was the most agonizing lesson of all. You can act with love and still lose, but again. Harry didn't crumble. He learned that bravery required more than action. It needed discipline, discernment, and an understanding of consequence. He saw the cracks in Dumbledore's armor and understood for the first time that even the wise are fallible. But no lesson shook Harry's foundation like the truth about Severus Snape. For years, Snape had been the villain in his story, cruel, vindictive, and wrapped in shadows. And yet, when the truth finally unraveled, when the pensieve revealed a broken boy who loved Lily Evans with a desperate and enduring passion, Harry's entire understanding of right and wrong shifted. He saw a man who had lived in the grey, who had made mistakes, chosen darkness, and then spent a lifetime clawing back toward the light. "Look at me," Snape whispered with his final breath, not as a demand, but as a final glimpse of Lily's eyes. Harry didn't just forgive Snape, he named his son after him, because he had learned to see the soul behind the surface, because forgiveness was no longer abstract. It was a choice he had to make to become whole. Throughout the Horcrux hunt, Harry faced perhaps the hardest test of all, the absence of guidance. Dumbledore was gone. The Golden Trio was fractured by fear and frustration. The path was no longer lit by adult advice or school rules. It was raw, directionless, dangerous, and still Harry adapted. When Ron left, Harry didn't rage. He waited. He understood that fear drives even the loyal to run. And when Ron returned, Harry welcomed him, not because he forgot, but because he had learned that friendship includes forgiveness. That winter in the forest, with no plan, little food, and a heavy locket around his neck, Harry discovered leadership not in speeches or brilliance, but in stillness. He learned how to endure. Even his failure to master occlumency was a kind of education. He couldn't close his mind to Voldemort, and that vulnerability made him suffer. But it also gave him understanding. Through the mental connection, Harry saw not just horror, but humanity. He saw the orphan in the cold, the boy who never knew love. He saw the choices that led Tom Riddle to become Voldemort. In the end, that connection wasn't a weakness. It was the reason Harry could walk into the forest, heart pounding, and lay down his life. He understood Voldemort better than Voldemort understood himself. That was power. Number 16, symbol of hope for the wizarding world. In the darkest hour of the wizarding world, when fear had taken root in every household, one name still burned like a beacon in the night: Harry Potter. Whispers of his survival echoed in secret corners of Diagon Alley, in hushed conversations at kitchen tables, and in the pages of the Daily Prophet, even as it became a tool of Voldemort's regime. People clung to the belief that Harry was alive, resisting, fighting back in the shadows. And that belief, more than any wand, spell, or prophecy, became the very foundation of their courage. When everything else fell, hope in Harry endured. His name was more than a name. It was a lifeline. This hope wasn't born from his deeds alone, but from what he represented. He had stood against Voldemort as a baby, survived the killing curse, and continued to challenge darkness again and again. Each act wasn't just personal bravery, it was a public defiance of tyranny. From rescuing Ginny Weasley from the Chamber of Secrets to summoning a Patronus against 100 Dementors, Harry became a figure whose life stories spread like folklore. His legacy was etched not only in the stone of Hogwarts, but in the collective memory of a community desperate for deliverance. The boy who lived was no longer just a title, it was a promise that evil could be resisted. Even those who had never met Harry spoke of him with reverence. Hannah Abbott once confessed, during a whispered conversation in the Hufflepuff common room, that she wore a small lightning bolt pin hidden inside her robes during the Carrow years. Neville Longbottom, whose own transformation into a leader was inspired by Harry's unwavering defiance, once risked everything to protect students from torture. These were not isolated acts of rebellion. They were small flames sparked by Harry's example, flames that refused to be extinguished. When the Ministry fell and was replaced by a puppet government that hunted Muggleborns, Harry's absence was terrifying. but it also became a source of resilience. No one knew where he was, but everyone believed he was still fighting. The trio's disappearance after Bill and Fleur's wedding left a void, but also birthed a myth. "He's out there," whispered shopkeepers in Nocturne Alley. "He's alive," murmured old witches clutching radios. The very fact that Voldemort feared Harry enough to plaster his face on wanted posters proved something crucial. Harry had not surrendered. His resistance lived on, even in silence. During the year that Hogwarts fell under the iron rule of Alecto and Amicus Caro, students faced nightly horrors. Yet even then, Harry's name became a quiet spell of defiance. Luna Lovegood painted murals of him in the Room of Requirement. Dean Thomas kept track of sightings and rumours through stolen newspapers. Ginny Weasley, though grieving her brother's injury and her friend's absence, led secret meetings where the name Dumbledore's Army was revived. The DA didn't need its founder to exist. They needed his spirit, and it endured in every clandestine gathering and every broken rule that shouted no to Voldemort's imposed order. One moment captures this power of belief better than most. When Harry returned to Hogwarts shortly before the Battle of Hogwarts, it wasn't just a dramatic narrative beat. It was the fulfillment of prophecy in the hearts of those who had been waiting. He emerged not as a student, but as a legend come home. The school itself reacted. Teachers who had kept their heads down rose to take arms. McGonagall cast a spell that awakened stone soldiers, their heavy feet echoing like thunder through the halls. Even the ghosts, like the Bloody Baron and the Grey Lady, seemed to move with greater purpose. For Harry had returned, and with him so had hope. It was during that final battle, in the Great Hall and on the battlements, that the truth became impossible to deny. Harry's true weapon had always been what he inspired in others. Molly Weasley, a mother of 7, threw herself into the fight with a fury that only a mother's love could ignite. She didn't do it for strategy, she did it for her family, and for the future Harry embodied. Professor Flitwick, tiny but fierce, stood beside giants to protect his students. The centaurs came from the Forbidden Forest. The house elves, led by Creature of all beings, surged from the kitchens with knives. None of them followed orders. They followed Harry. Voldemort, for all his cunning and terror, never understood this. He ruled by fear, controlled through cruelty, and measured strength by destruction. He saw loyalty as weakness and love as a distraction. That's why he could never grasp why the wizarding world wouldn't simply break. Why did they keep resisting, hiding Muggleborn, sabotaging his plans, risking their lives for causes that should have been lost? It was because of Harry. Because in a world ravaged by despair, he remained proof that resistance was not only possible but essential. His very survival was an act of rebellion. Even Severus Snape, buried under years of secrets and self-hatred, found himself caught in the gravitational pull of Harry's destiny. Though their relationship was marred by bitterness, Snape's protection of Harry stemmed from a belief that Harry mattered, not just to Lily, but to the world. "Look at me," he whispered, with his dying breath, but what he was really saying was that Harry had become something more than a boy. He was the last hope of a broken man's redemption. That mattered. Number 17, his story was about love, not magic. He stood alone in the Forbidden Forest, heart pounding like war drums in his chest. The forest had always been dark, but now it felt like death itself breathed between the trees. Harry Potter walked forward, unarmed, not because he wanted to die, but because he loved. Every step he took toward Voldemort was not fueled by anger or vengeance. It was not a calculated move to outwit his enemy. It was the decision of someone who had been loved selflessly and had learned to love just as deeply in return. And that, in the end, made all the difference. Years before, in a different world, a baby had survived the most powerful curse known to the magical world. Not because he was special, or because of ancient prophecies, or even because of destiny. He survived because of love. Lily Potter's sacrifice had carved a protection so ancient and pure that even the Dark Lord himself, in all his pride, failed to recognize it. To have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever, Dumbledore had told Harry. That truth was not just a sentimental comfort. It was a spell more powerful than any wand could cast. Voldemort never understood that love could create magic deeper than any curse. Throughout his life, Harry had the opportunity to choose hatred. He had every reason to be bitter. He had lost his parents before he could know them, suffered under the Dursleys' cruelty, and lived under the shadow of a prophecy that marked him for death. And yet, instead of succumbing to the darkness, he clung to light. The friendships he built with Ron and Hermione weren't just plot devices or emotional cushions, they were lifelines. In the Chamber of Secrets, when all seemed lost, it was Fawkes and the Sorting Hat that brought help, but it was Ron's unwavering loyalty that gave Harry strength to go down in the first place. In the Triwizard Tournament, it was Hermione who believed in him when others doubted his innocence. Love was the invisible hand that pushed Harry forward through every obstacle. Harry never sought power. When he first held the Elder Wand, he didn't feel triumph, he felt burdened. He broke it not because he underestimated its value, but because he understood that real power doesn't lie in objects. Real power is in choices. Voldemort spent his life chasing Horcruxes, immortality, and domination. Harry spent his life trying to protect others. He threw himself in front of danger time and again, not because he was fearless, but because he was bound by love to those he cherished. When Sirius was taken to the Department of Mysteries, Harry didn't hesitate. It wasn't logic, it was love. And though the mission went horribly wrong, his willingness to risk his life for his godfather showed who he truly was. Voldemort mocked love as weakness. He couldn't grasp its power because he had never known it. He was conceived under a love potion, a child born not of affection, but of manipulation. Raised in an orphanage, detached from compassion, he believed fear was the only reliable tool. He didn't understand why Dumbledore feared for Harry's soul more than his life. He didn't understand why Snape's love for Lily made him betray him. He didn't understand why Harry didn't strike when he had the chance. In that final moment in the Great Hall, Voldemort held the Elder Wand, sure of victory, but Harry, speaking of Snape's sacrifice, of Draco's spared life, of Dumbledore's plan, revealed the truth. That wand's allegiance was never yours. Even Harry's final confrontation wasn't an act of hatred. He didn't want Voldemort to suffer. He offered him a chance. Try for some remorse, Tom. It wasn't arrogance, it was empathy. The boy who had lost so much still found room in his heart for mercy. Voldemort refused, unable to see the humanity in Harry's offer. And that was the moment he lost, because he couldn't recognize the thing that made Harry invincible, not the Horcrux in him, not the mastery of wand lore, but the simple, dangerous power of a heart still open to love. Severus Snape's story is perhaps the most tragic testament to this idea. A man broken by loss, turned bitter and cruel, but who in the end acted out of love, not for glory, not for redemption, but for Lily. "You have your mother's eyes" was not just a recurring phrase, it was a symbol. The love that saved Harry began with Lily and echoed through Snape, through Dumbledore, through the very walls of Hogwarts. Harry was the product of love passed from person to person, even those who could never admit it aloud. Even Draco Malfoy, when he hesitated in the Room of Requirement, revealed that there were still parts of him not yet lost to fear and ambition. It was Harry who extended his hand to save him, and that moment mattered more than any duel. Time and again, Harry chose love over hatred. When he spared Peter Pettigrew in the Shrieking Shack, he didn't do it out of pity but out of principle. "I'm not going to kill you, Peter. That's not how it works." That decision returned to him in the Malfoy Manor when Wormtail's own hand turned on him. Even in the smallest of acts, Harry's story was never just about defeating evil. It was about not becoming it. In resisting the darkness, he preserved the very thing Voldemort had destroyed in himself: humanity. The protective magic of Lily's love did not end with her sacrifice. It lived in Harry's blood, and Dumbledore knew that. That's why he placed him with the Dursleys, not out of cruelty, but because Petunia shared Lily's blood, continuing the enchantment. That layer of protection was invisible but essential. When Voldemort used Harry's blood to restore his body, he unknowingly tethered himself to that magic of love. In trying to conquer it, he became subject to it. Dumbledore explained, "He took your blood and rebuilt his body with it. He put a part of your mother's protection in himself." Dobby's sacrifice is another example often overlooked. The elf didn't die because of duty, he died because he loved Harry. Dobby is happy to be with his friend Harry Potter. Those words weren't just touching, they were powerful. Voldemort had servants, allies, spies. Harry had friends, real ones. The difference between an army and a family defined the outcome of the war. The DA wasn't just a secret club, it was a bond. The Order of the Phoenix wasn't a military unit, it was a community. Harry's side fought for each other, not just with each other. Even in the darkest places, Harry carried the warmth of connection. In the graveyard in Little Hangleton, as Voldemort rose again, it was the echo of his parents and Cedric that helped him escape. When the Priori Incantatem revealed their shadows, it was not magic that saved Harry. It was the love and courage of those who had died for him. "Hold on, Harry," James's echo said, not with force, but with care. That moment wasn't a spell, it was a reunion, and it gave him the time he needed. Love wasn't just the theme of Harry's life, it was the weapon he carried unknowingly. When he walked to his death in the forest, he did so not because he had to, but because he chose to. He believed that by sacrificing himself, he could save others. That act, echoing Lily's original protection, extended to everyone at Hogwarts. When Voldemort cast the killing curse again, it rebounded, not only because of wand allegiance, but because Harry had already won. He had disarmed death with the only thing that ever could. The Mirror of Erised showed Harry his family, not fame or power. The Resurrection Stone brought him comfort, not ambition. He never used these artifacts to gain leverage. He used them to remember, to feel. Voldemort turned the hallows into instruments of dominance. Harry turned them into symbols of love and memory. That contrast reveals everything. One sought immortality, the other sought peace. One feared death, the other walked willingly toward it. In the end, Harry wasn't the chosen one because of a prophecy. He was the chosen one because he chose love. He didn't conquer Voldemort, he transcended him. Every character around Harry, from Luna to Neville, from Hagrid to Molly, mirrored his choices. They all loved fiercely, and that love gave them courage. "You're the weak one," Harry once told Voldemort in another form, "and you'll never know love or friendship." That was his greatest power. That was the magic that saved the wizarding world. Number 18. Protected by ancient magical laws. In the wizarding world, where spells are flung and wands wielded with ease, it is easy to overlook the silent power of ancient magic. This type of magic does not announce itself with a flash of light or a shouted incantation. It works in silence, in shadows, governed by laws so old that most wizards have forgotten they exist. Yet these ancient magical laws are precisely what helped Harry Potter do what no other witch or wizard had ever accomplished: defeat Lord Voldemort, not through brute magical force or sheer power, but by being protected by forgotten rules of magic, often woven through love, blood, and sacrifice. One of the most potent examples of such a law was set into motion on the night Lily Potter died. Her choice to lay down her life for her son triggered a powerful blood magic, the likes of which even Voldemort underestimated. As Dumbledore explained, "He took your blood and believes that this will make him stronger. He is right, it will, but it ties you to life while he lives." Lily's protection was not a shield thrown in a duel, but a fundamental rewrite of magical boundaries around her child. Voldemort, for all his knowledge and obsession with immortality, could not comprehend that love, true, selfless love, could manifest as a magical force. The significance of this blood magic extended beyond Lily's death. When Dumbledore left Harry in the care of Petunia Dursley, he did more than give a child a home. He anchored the ancient protective spell in the very foundation of Harry's life. Petunia, though a Muggle, was Lily's blood relative. That connection extended the power of Lily's sacrifice and wrapped Harry in an invisible cloak of safety, one Voldemort could not touch. As long as Harry called Fall Privet Drive home, he could not be harmed by the Dark Lord. The rules were simple and absolute, yet their origin lay in arcane principles even seasoned wizards barely understood. Dumbledore's genius was not just in recognizing these old laws, but in using them in ways Voldemort would never consider. Where Voldemort sought power through dominance and fear, Dumbledore understood that ancient magic had its own rhythm, its own code. In many ways, Voldemort's downfall began not with his first defeat, but with his failure to respect the power of magic he could not quantify. He believed magic was to be mastered, tamed, twisted to his will. But ancient magic resists ownership. It rewards humility and punishes arrogance. Years later, during the graveyard duel in Goblet of Fire, another ancient magical principle surfaced: priori incantatem. When two wands that share the same core, Harry's and Voldemort's, both containing feathers from forks, are forced to duel, a strange effect occurs. Instead of one overpowering the other, the wands lock in a magical tug-of-war. In that instant, a golden thread of energy connected Harry and Voldemort. Shadows of the dead appeared, echoes of Cedric Diggory, Frank Bryce, Bertha Jorkins, and finally James and Lily. These phantoms emerged not through necromancy, but through the forgotten will of the wands themselves, obeying rules carved into the heart of wand lore. Voldemort, who had always trusted raw power, was shaken. It was not just a tactical failure, it was a crack in his invincibility. The implications of priori incantatem ran deeper than just a fortunate accident. It revealed that magical tools, like wands, operate under their own logic, one that ancient wand-makers like Ollivander understand in whispers, not in textbooks. Voldemort had stolen the Elder Wand, believing it would make him unbeatable, but he overlooked the wand's allegiance, a concept embedded in wand lore's oldest traditions. Magic remembers, magic records loyalty, magic does not forget who deserves its service. Harry's mastery of the Elder Wand came not through conquest, but through compassion and humility, qualities woven into the wand's deepest enchantments. The concept of sacrificial protection reappeared during the Battle of Hogwarts. When Harry willingly walked into the Forbidden Forest to face death, he did more than demonstrate courage. He activated the same magic his mother had once invoked. By offering his life for his friends, Harry unknowingly cast a wide protective net over everyone he loved. As Dumbledore would later explain, "You were the seventh Horcrux, Harry. The Horcrux inside you was destroyed the moment you accepted death." His act of surrender summoned a force Voldemort could never understand, an echo of ancient magic that rendered his attacks impotent. Even as he cast the killing curse, Voldemort sealed his own fate, misunderstanding the very nature of the magic he wielded. These laws of ancient magic are not always logical by human standards. They operate with emotion, intention, and moral consequence. A wizard like Voldemort, who split his soul and murdered without remorse, could never harness them. His very existence repelled these laws. Harry, on the other hand, lived in alignment with them, often unintentionally. His compassion, loyalty, and willingness to die for others became his armor. The magical world, in its ancient wisdom, recognized those qualities and responded with protection. Even the Horcruxes themselves were subject to mysterious magical behavior. When Harry destroyed the locket with the sword of Gryffindor, it worked not because of brute force, but because the sword had absorbed basilisk venom. Why did it absorb venom? Because it had once been used to slay a basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets. Goblin forged, the sword imbibed that which strengthened it, a trait only a few would remember. Voldemort, obsessed with the visible and the dramatic, never grasped the subtleties of such magical artifacts. He created Horcruxes and believed them eternal. But magic, especially ancient magic, carries its own justice. The very methods he used to secure immortality became keys to his destruction. Consider the Resurrection Stone, another artifact bound by ancient enchantments. Hidden inside the golden snitch, it responded only to Harry when he was prepared to die. The enchantment carved on the snitch, "I open at the close always," was not a riddle of logic, but a phrase meant to resonate with destiny. Only at the close of Harry's journey, when he chose death, did the stone reveal itself. Again, the magical mechanism defied explanation by spells or potions. It obeyed a deeper law, one tied to intention and sacrifice. Harry didn't use the stone to cheat death. He used it to gather strength from those who loved him, further aligning himself with the principles of protection and love that magic respected. Throughout his life, Harry was often unaware of the magical shields that guarded him. He did not summon them, nor did he always understand them. But they were there, inherited, activated, and honored by his choices. Voldemort, for all his cunning, never understood that magic was not merely a tool. It was a living force, ancient and discerning. It responded not only to words and wands, but to motive and heart. Even the final confrontation in the Great Hall was governed by these invisible laws. Voldemort believed himself the true master of the Elder Wand, but the wand recognized Harry as its master, not because of magical force, but because of a subtle chain of loyalty. Draco had disarmed Dumbledore, and Harry had disarmed Draco. The allegiance transferred silently, invisibly. Voldemort never saw it happen. As he cast the final killing curse, the wand rebelled. The spell backfired, not because Harry was stronger, but because the wand had chosen. That decision, rooted in centuries of wand lore, fulfilled a fate Voldemort never saw coming. In the end, it was not the known spells that saved Harry, but the forgotten ones, the laws etched into the very bones of the magical world. From sacrificial blood magic to wand loyalty, from ancient enchantments to moral cause and effect, these forces watched over Harry like unseen guardians. They recognized his choices and amplified them. They punished Voldemort not with lightning or fire, but with the subtle, inescapable weight of consequences. And in that the wizarding world showed its true face, not as a battlefield of spells, but as a realm where ancient laws wait in silence, ready to protect those who honor them. Number 19, free from the poison of vengeance. When Harry stood in front of Lord Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest, surrounded by Death Eaters, and on the verge of certain death, it wasn't hatred or vengeance that filled his heart, it was peace. This singular moment, quiet and brave, held the essence of everything that made Harry different from the man he faced. He didn't want revenge, he wanted it to end. Voldemort, who had murdered his parents, hunted him for years, and brought death to so many, was about to strike the final blow. But Harry didn't raise his wand, he didn't fight back. He walked into death not to destroy his enemy, but to save others. This is what made him stronger than Voldemort ever could be. Voldemort's entire life was defined by power and control. Every action, every murder was driven by fear and the desire to dominate. He believed love was a weakness and mercy a flaw. He pursued immortality with desperation because he feared death more than anything else. Harry, on the other hand, was willing to die. He embraced the very thing Voldemort feared, and in that moment he became untouchable. This contrast wasn't just poetic, it was pivotal. It was the reason Harry won. It wasn't strength of spell or mastery of dueling, it was choice. Throughout the series, Harry is given countless chances to take revenge, and yet he never does. When Peter Pettigrew, Wormtail, the very man responsible for betraying James and Lily Potter, was at his mercy in the Shrieking Shack, Harry stopped Sirius and Remus from killing him. "If you kill him, we're no better than he is." That wasn't just a plea, it was a line in the sand, one Harry would never cross. He understood that justice doesn't always wear the mask of revenge. He believed that some boundaries should never be broken, no matter how much the past hurt. In Malfoy Manor, with the faces of Death Eaters and traitors looming in the shadows, Harry didn't act on anger. Draco Malfoy, who had humiliated and attacked him for years, stood uncertain and exposed. Narcissa Malfoy, who had lied to Voldemort to protect her son, gave Harry a silent path to escape. And Harry didn't return with fury. He didn't destroy their family in the name of justice. He walked away. He could have let the Malfoys burn with the rest of the Dark Lord's allies, but he didn't, because Harry knew the difference between enemies and victims of fear. Even Severus Snape, the man Harry had hated since his first year, who had seemingly killed Dumbledore, wasn't met with vengeance. When Harry found Snape dying in the boathouse, he didn't let him suffer. He knelt by him, watched the life drain from his eyes, and listened. It would have been so easy to turn away, but Harry didn't. Because behind every bitter face, he sought the truth. And when that truth was finally revealed, when he saw Snape's memories of Lily, of sacrifice, of love, Harry's grief transformed into understanding. He didn't curse Snape's name anymore. He named his son after him. This mercy, this refusal to be consumed by hatred, shaped everything Harry did. His power came not from curses or hexes, but from restraint. He stood before evil again and again, and chose not to become it. Voldemort couldn't understand that. He saw mercy as weakness. But Dumbledore had warned of this, told Harry long before the final battle. "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." Voldemort lived without love. Harry was made of it. When the Elder Wand, greatest wand of all time, chose Harry, it wasn't because of blood, or heritage, or might. It was because he had never sought it. Voldemort murdered to own it. Harry broke it and threw it away. The wand responded to loyalty, not conquest. It bent to the boy who didn't want its power. That moment told the entire story. Harry's strength lay in not wanting to rule. He didn't want glory. He didn't want to be a hero. He just wanted people to be safe. Even when Harry had to face Voldemort for the last time, after so much pain, loss, and horror, he didn't gloat. He didn't mock the man who had caused it all. He gave him a chance. He called him Tom. He told him to feel remorse. Harry wanted him to find his soul again. He didn't want him to die, not like that. This wasn't a battle of spells. It was a plea to a broken man. And when Voldemort refused, when the last spell was cast, it was his own curse that backfired, just as it had the night he tried to kill a baby in Godric's Hollow. That baby had grown up not seeking revenge, but love. When Sirius Black died, Harry was shattered. The man who had offered him a home, who represented family, was gone. Bellatrix Lestrange laughed as she disappeared. Harry ran after her, filled with pain. And yet even then he didn't kill her. Not in rage. His wand trembled, but his heart didn't break. He carried that grief, but didn't become it. That was the difference. That was why he could stand tall, while others fell. After Dobby died, after the house elf gave his life to save Harry and his friends, Harry didn't scream. He didn't explode with fury. He dug a grave by hand. Stone by stone, he honored life. He wept, yes, but even in grief, he stayed human. Where Voldemort desecrated graves for power, Harry created one for love. He remembered those who fell not as weapons of war, but as souls worth mourning. In the chaos of war, when fear made others ruthless, Harry held on to compassion. He didn't want to see Malfoy dead. He didn't want to see the Carrows tortured. He saved lives, even when those lives had brought him pain. During the Battle of Hogwarts, he risked his safety to make sure others survived. That selflessness, quiet and unspoken, is the mark of a true leader. He didn't ask for followers. They chose to follow him because he led with heart, not ambition. Over and over again, Harry made the hard choice not to retaliate, not to let darkness take root. Even when the world was unfair, even when the ministry turned on him, smeared his name, called him a liar, he never lashed out. He held his head high. He didn't fight with bitterness. He fought with truth. His courage wasn't loud. It was patient. It waited. And in time, it won. The prophecy had said, neither can live while the other survives. But that was never the whole truth. Harry didn't want Voldemort to die. He wanted the horror to end. That distinction, subtle but immense, saved him. It allowed him to walk into the forest and let go. It let him stand before death and accept it. And death, in return, gave him back his life. Because unlike Voldemort, Harry didn't try to cheat it. He embraced it for love's sake. When Harry returned, when he rose from the forest and faced Voldemort one last time, he wasn't just a survivor, he was a symbol, a boy who had been broken, healed by friendship, love, sacrifice, and mercy, a boy who had the right to destroy but never took it. That's why the wizarding world followed him, that's why they believed in him, not because he defeated the Dark Lord, but because he never became one. That is why Harry Potter truly won. He never let go of his soul. He was never tempted to become the monster he fought. And that, in the end, was the greatest power of all. Number 20. He inspired others to be brave. There was something extraordinary about the way Harry Potter carried himself in the face of fear. It wasn't his skill with a wand or his reputation as the boy who lived that made people follow him into darkness. It was his refusal to let fear corrupt his heart. In the Department of Mysteries, when 6 teenagers stood against a band of Death Eaters, it was not because Harry had promised them victory. It was because they saw in him someone who would walk into danger even if it killed him. That kind of raw, unpretentious bravery had a strange way of making others feel braver too. Even Hermione, who always clung to logic, trusted Harry's gut over her own reason when it mattered most. Ron, whose insecurities ran deep, faced his worst nightmares simply because Harry believed he could. Harry never used speeches or threats. He inspired by example, through pain, through humility, and through the quiet force of his loyalty. The creation of Dumbledore's army was not born out of ego, but out of necessity, and yet it became something much greater. It was Harry's idea to teach his fellow students how to fight, not because he sought power or admiration, but because he couldn't bear to watch them remain helpless while evil crept through the cracks of Hogwarts. Every great wizard in history has started out as nothing more than what we are now, he had told them. If they can do it, why not us? That line wasn't in a book. It didn't need a spell, but it changed lives. It wasn't just Ginny and Neville and Luna who came to the Room of Requirement. It was people like Susan Bones, who had lost family to Voldemort. It was Dennis and Colin Creevey, who were too young to be there but came anyway. They weren't following Harry because he promised success. They followed him because he believed they could matter. There were countless moments when Harry could have played the hero alone, but he didn't. In the cave with Dumbledore, he obeyed. In the graveyard with Cedric, he tried to share the glory. When he returned from the Triwizard Tournament, dragging Cedric's body with tears in his eyes, he didn't pretend to be a victor. He let the pain show. That vulnerability, unguarded and real, made him human. It made people trust him, not as a savior, but as someone who was suffering with them. That is why McGonagall, a woman of stern logic and discipline, later stood by him without question. That is why Molly Weasley treated him like a son. He didn't ask for loyalty. He earned it by never abandoning those who needed him, even when he had nothing left to give. Neville Longbottom might have been dismissed as a clumsy afterthought by many in their early years, but Harry never mocked him. He treated him with quiet respect, not pity. When Neville stood up to Bellatrix Lestrange, wand shaking but heart steady, it was not just revenge for his parents, it was the legacy of Harry's example. And when Voldemort called Neville forward in the final battle, mocking him as the last hope of the dying rebellion, it was Neville who drew the sword of Gryffindor and destroyed the final Horcrux. That moment wasn't luck, it was culmination. Neville had watched Harry sacrifice. Again and again, never for glory, always for others, and in the end, it wasn't Harry who dealt the final blow to Voldemort's soul. It was someone inspired by his courage. Luna Lovegood was another outcast who found strength under Harry's shadow. She never needed to be popular. She needed to be seen. Harry did that. He never laughed at her beliefs, never silenced her odd wisdom. He listened. When she spoke of Thestrals or Nargles, he didn't mock her, he valued her voice. That mattered. Because when the time came to sneak into the Ministry of Magic, Luna stood beside him. And when the final war came, she was not in the background. She was at the center, fighting, healing, surviving. Harry didn't create warriors. He reminded people they had been brave all along. They simply needed someone to believe in them. Even Draco Malfoy's mother, Narcissa, made her choice, not with a wand, but with a whisper. When she lied to Voldemort and declared Harry dead, she did it not out of allegiance, but out of something more powerful, a mother's love and a quiet gratitude. Harry, who had saved Draco's life at the Room of Requirement, didn't gloat or use him as leverage. He spared him. That mercy echoed. When Narcissa knelt over his seemingly lifeless body, her loyalty was not to Voldemort, but to her son. And Harry, by refusing to see enemies where there were only frightened people, cracked the armor of those who might have otherwise stood against him. His compassion disarmed more than curses ever could. One of the most telling moments of Harry's power to inspire came not on a battlefield, but in a classroom. When Professor Umbridge ruled Hogwarts with cruelty, many shrank in fear, but Harry didn't. He stood up and told the truth, even as she tried to silence him. That act sparked a rebellion. Students who had never spoken out before began to resist. Cho Chang, broken by Cedric's death, joined the DA to heal. Seamus Finnegan, who had doubted Harry for months, apologized and came back. "I'm sorry," he had said. "I believe you now." The belief mattered, not just to Harry, but to every student who needed to know they weren't alone in their fight. Ron Weasley, forever in Harry's shadow, became a hero in his own right, not by accident but through shared trials. When he left the trio in the woods, driven by fear and the pull of the Horcrux, it seemed like betrayal. But he returned. He saved Harry from drowning and destroyed a piece of Voldemort's soul. He did it not because Harry asked, but because deep down, Ron had learned that true strength was not about being the best, but about coming back even after you fail. That was a lesson Harry taught by living it again and again. Even Creature, the bitter house elf enslaved by old prejudices, changed under Harry's influence. When Harry treated him with dignity, gave him the locket of his old master, and asked for help rather than commanding it, something shifted. By the time of the final battle, Creature was leading a charge of house elves with knives and fury, shouting for Harry Potter. That transformation didn't come from magic, it came from being seen as a being with worth. Harry didn't just lead wizards, he led hearts. The resistance at Hogwarts, led by Neville and others during the final year, was not orchestrated by Harry. He wasn't even there. And yet his spirit lived in every corridor. They painted his name on walls, passed around stories of his courage, and upheld the DA in secret. That is perhaps the clearest testament to his influence. He didn't need to be present to lead. He had planted something in them, an unshakable belief that good was worth fighting for. And when he returned to the castle, they didn't hesitate. They closed ranks around him, not because he asked, but because they had waited for the moment to stand beside him again. When Harry chose to walk into the forbidden forest, knowing he would die, he didn't tell anyone. He didn't ask them to grieve or to follow. He made peace with death quietly, kissed the marauder's map, and left. That decision, private and full of love, radiated outward like a spell with no incantation. Because when he came back, alive by miracle or fate, they knew they had seen something sacred. His death was not a performance, it was a gift. A boy walking into darkness so others could find light. What Voldemort never understood and never could was that power doesn't come from domination, it comes from trust. The Dark Lord ruled through fear, through punishments and lies. Harry, without a title or throne, led armies of broken teenagers, mothers, misfits and ghosts. And they followed him into fire, not because he forced them, but because he reminded them of who they were. Colin Creevey died in the battle, camera still strapped around his neck. He wasn't supposed to be there, too young, too small, too easily forgotten, but he came back, because Harry had shown him that being small didn't mean being powerless. Colin died not just for Hogwarts, but for an idea that one person's courage can echo through others, even into death. There were no parades when it ended, no shining crown placed upon Harry's head. But there was silence, heavy and full, as those who had stood beside him counted the cost and wept. And in the centre stood a boy who never asked to be followed, only to be believed. That was Harry's gift. That was how he won. Number 21, he understood the cost of death. From the very beginning of his life, Harry Potter knew loss. It wasn't an abstract concept taught through books or whispered about in hushed tones. It was real. It was raw. And it was etched into the deepest layers of his memory. He grew up in a cupboard under the stairs, not just in physical confinement, but in emotional isolation, haunted by the shadows of people he had never met. His parents. He never knew Lily and James Potter, but he carried the weight of their deaths every day. Every birthday without them, every quiet night with no one to say good night, every punishment from the Dursleys only made the void louder. And yet this absence of love did not harden him. It shaped his capacity for empathy. While Voldemort's fear of death twisted him into something inhuman, Harry's grief taught him to value the fleeting beauty of life. He saw death again and again, and every time it taught him something new. When Cedric Diggory was murdered in the graveyard, Harry was just 14. It was his first experience watching someone die in front of him, someone good, someone innocent. Cedric's death was not just a loss, it was a revelation. It marked the end of a relatively protected childhood and the beginning of a war. He carried Cedric's body back, trembling, and faced a world that refused to believe him. Still, Harry didn't turn bitter. He didn't seek vengeance. He bore the pain with the kind of strength that Voldemort could never comprehend, the strength to mourn without hate. Sirius Black's death was perhaps even more personal. He wasn't just Harry's godfather, he was the closest thing to a parent Harry had ever known. Sirius gave him hope, a vision of a future that wasn't defined by prophecy or obligation. When Sirius fell through the veil at the Department of Mysteries, Harry's scream was not just from the loss of a loved one, it was the shattering of a dream. Yet, even in the midst of that unbearable loss, Harry did not retreat into himself. He continued to fight. "You're the weak one, and you'll never know love or friendship. And I feel sorry for you," Harry once said. It wasn't an insult, it was truth. Voldemort had severed himself from the very things that give life its meaning. Harry, by contrast, embraced every ounce of sorrow because it reminded him that he had something worth losing. Dumbledore's death brought another kind of pain. It wasn't sudden like Cedric's or intimate like Sirius's. It was a death wrapped in layers of mystery and planning. Harry witnessed it from behind a petrifying curse, unable to act. For a time, he felt abandoned, but then he realized Dumbledore had died with a purpose, to give Harry a chance. The weight of that sacrifice didn't turn Harry into a martyr. Instead, it grounded him. It taught him that leadership wasn't about control, but about trust. Even in death, Dumbledore guided him, and Harry learned to walk into darkness not with bravado, but with faith. When Dobby died in his arms, it was the death of innocence itself. The house elf who once served others found freedom not just in clothing, but in purpose. He saved Harry and his friends and paid for it with his life. Here lies Dobby, a free elf, Harry carved into the ground with his own hands. He didn't delegate the task, he didn't rush it. That act of burying Dobby with respect, with love, was not trivial. It was a rejection of the dehumanization that Voldemort thrived on. It was a silent defiance against everything the Dark Lord represented. Voldemort believed some lives were disposable. Harry proved that no life was too small to matter. The loss of Fred Weasley in the Battle of Hogwarts was a blow not just to Harry, but to the entire spirit of resistance. Fred, who had laughed in the face of fear, who had given joy in times of despair, was gone. But even then, Harry did not let grief paralyze him. He moved forward not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. Every step he took was in memory of those who had fallen. Unlike Voldemort, who saw death as a threat to be conquered, Harry saw death as a companion on the path to meaning. That understanding reached its most profound expression when Harry chose to walk into the Forbidden Forest. He knew he would die. He did not flinch. He did not hesitate. He accepted death not as a punishment, but as a gift, the ultimate act of protection for those he loved. The resurrection stone did not give him power. It reminded him of those who had gone before, of the love that never left him. James, Lily, Sirius, and Remus were not ghosts. They were the compass of his soul. In that moment, Harry understood that to die was not to be lost forever. It was to become part of something larger than himself. Voldemort, in his desperation, tore his soul to shreds to avoid death. He created Horcruxes, monstrous artifacts that mocked the sanctity of life. But Harry did not cling to life. He released it. And that's why he returned. Not through spells, not through tricks, but through choice. His willingness to die made him the master of death in the truest sense. The Elder Wand, the most powerful wand in existence, responded not to arrogance, but to humility. When Harry chose to break it and toss it away, he broke the cycle of obsession that had claimed so many lives before him. He never sought glory. He never wanted followers. He didn't stand on the battlefield with triumphant speeches. He walked silently, often alone, carrying the unbearable burden of memory, and yet he never gave in to despair. He held on to the belief that love was stronger than death. When Voldemort screamed, "There is no good and evil, there is only power," Harry proved him wrong not with magic, but with mercy. He chose not to kill Draco. He saved Dudley. He spared Peter Pettigrew. These weren't acts of naivety. They were choices rooted in the painful understanding that violence only breeds more violence. Harry never glamorized death, but he refused to fear it. That's what made him different. Voldemort feared it so much that he became a shell of a man. He could not comprehend sacrifice, could not fathom laying down his life for others, but Harry did, again and again. He lived with the constant possibility of death, and rather than let it cripple him, he let it sharpen his focus. He didn't waste time chasing illusions. He cherished what he had, even if it was brief. His friendship with Ron and Hermione was more than companionship. It was a bond forged in the fire of shared loss. They saw friends die, saw the world crumble, and still they stood by each other. This loyalty wasn't born out of convenience, but out of conviction. When Ron left, Harry did not beg him to stay. When he returned, Harry welcomed him without reproach. This ability to forgive, to understand, to accept imperfection, it was another form of mastery over death. Voldemort demanded obedience. Harry inspired loyalty. The difference between them wasn't power, it was purpose. Voldemort wanted to escape death because he feared judgment, he feared the void. But Harry, even as a child, faced the unknown with a steady gaze. When he stood in front of the mirror of Erised, he didn't see himself ruling the world. He saw his family. That longing, that ache, followed him his entire life, but it never consumed him. He didn't try to bring the dead back unnaturally. He honored them by living with courage. When Harry said to his son, "The bravest man I ever knew was a Slytherin," he wasn't just talking about Snape. He was acknowledging that bravery comes in many forms, that even those shaped by fear can find redemption. Voldemort, in all his might, never understood that. He saw weakness in compassion, vulnerability in kindness, but Harry's life was a testament to the opposite. Every act of tenderness made him stronger, not weaker. The final battle was not won with spells, but with choices. Harry chose to disarm, not kill. He chose to risk everything for others. He chose to walk into the forest. And that's why he won. Because he understood that death is not the enemy. It is a teacher. And those who learn from it, who do not fear it, become something more than mortal. They become legend. Number 22. His Muggle upbringing was his armor. There was a moment in the final book when Harry walked alone into the Forbidden Forest, knowing full well he was walking to his death. The Resurrection Stone had brought him fleeting comfort, but it wasn't magic that gave him the strength to keep walking. It was something deeper, something older than spells. It was resilience, born not from Hogwarts or wand work, but from the cupboard under the stairs at number 4. Privet Drive. That cupboard, dusty and cruel, gave Harry a kind of grounding Voldemort never had. It gave him humility, perspective, and an unshakable sense of what it means to be human in a world that constantly tries to turn you into something else. Voldemort could never understand that kind of strength because he had never lived without power and never lived without the belief that power was all that mattered. When Harry entered the wizarding world, he did not come with illusions. He had seen the worst of the mundane world: neglect, bullying, hunger, humiliation. Dudley Dursley had been the petty tyrant of his childhood, and Vernon Dursley the cruel dictator. But in surviving them, Harry didn't just learn endurance. He learned the value of small mercies, a sandwich given with kindness, a letter from Hagrid that finally made him feel like he belonged somewhere. These weren't grand spells or legendary duels. They were the roots of empathy. And when that empathy met the world of magic, it bloomed into a rare kind of courage, one that chose to protect rather than dominate, to understand rather than destroy. Voldemort, by contrast, viewed the Muggle world as something to be escaped, then dominated. Even as a child in the orphanage, Tom Riddle saw non-magical people as lesser beings. When Dumbledore first met him, the boy boasted, "I can make people hurt if I want to." Magic, for Riddle, was a weapon, not a gift. It made him special, and more importantly, it made others inferior. This attitude festered as he grew. He never spent a single day feeling like one of them, those powerless, fragile Muggles. He despised them. That contempt, so deeply ingrained, would later drive him to cleanse the magical world of all he considered impure. But Harry? Harry had scrubbed floors with Muggles. He had eaten stale birthday cake, alone while they celebrated without him. He knew the dignity of those lives, and so he never felt the need to prove he was better. The wizarding world had its own version of pride: pure-blood supremacy, inherited privilege, power, hierarchies masquerading as tradition. But Harry, thanks to his upbringing, was immune to those illusions. Draco Malfoy's early taunts about blood status had no real power over him. "You'll soon find out some wizarding families are better than others, Potter," Malfoy sneered. But Harry, who had worn Dudley's old clothes and slept in a cupboard, simply didn't care. He judged people not by their bloodlines, but by their actions. It's why he instantly bonded with Ron Weasley, whose family was mocked for their poverty but glowed with genuine warmth. And it's why he instantly rejected Malfoy's offer of friendship. That deep moral compass was not taught at Hogwarts. It was forged in the silence of a locked cupboard where Harry had hours to imagine a better world. It was strengthened in the lonely walks to school, the bruises hidden under sleeves, the meals skipped without complaint. While Voldemort grew up feeling entitled to power, Harry grew up astonished to receive kindness, and that gratitude became his armor. When Dumbledore told him that love was the most powerful magic of all, Harry didn't scoff. He had lived a life where love was scarce, so he understood its worth. Voldemort had never known it, and so he underestimated it again and again. Even Harry's signature spell, Expelliarmus, tells a deeper story. It's not a flashy or aggressive spell. It disarms. It ends conflict without destruction. Snape once called it your signature move, almost mockingly. But Harry chose that spell again and again, even in the most dangerous duels. In the graveyard in Goblet of Fire, facing Voldemort surrounded by Death Eaters, Harry used it, not to kill, not to maim, but to survive without losing himself. That's a choice rooted not in magical strategy, but in human ethics. A boy who had grown up in a world without spells chose the one spell that best reflected the values he had learned there. During the Triwizard Tournament, Harry's actions were constantly shaped by empathy. He saved Fleur's sister in the second task, though he didn't have to. He helped Cedric in the maze. When faced with the cup that would take him to his doom, he insisted Cedric take it with him. "You take it," Cedric said, but Harry replied, "You help me with the egg, we'll take it together." That wasn't Hogwarts training. That wasn't magical instinct. That was the boy who once gave his last sandwich to a hungry classmate at school, the boy who knew what it felt like to be overlooked and so refused to do the same to others. Voldemort's fatal flaw wasn't just arrogance, it was isolation. He trusted no one, valued no one, and saw loyalty as weakness. Harry, on the other hand, built a family where there had been none. Ron and Hermione weren't just companions, they were the siblings he never had. The Weasleys became his home. Even Creature, the house elf, once filled with bitterness, was redeemed by Harry's kindness. That ability to see others, to understand them despite their flaws, was never magical. It was human, and that made it stronger. When Harry spared Peter Pettigrew's life in Prisoner of Azkaban, despite everything, it wasn't naivety, it was principle. "I don't reckon my dad would have wanted them to become killers," Harry said. That wasn't magic speaking, that was heart. The prophecy said neither could live while the other survived. But it never said the stronger wizard would win. Strength in the magical world often meant spells, power, skill. But true strength, as Dumbledore often tried to teach, came from the ability to resist temptation. The Mirror of Erised, the Resurrection Stone, the Elder Wand, each was a test. Voldemort failed every single one. Harry passed not because he was more talented, but because he had been trained by a world that didn't care about magic. The boy who grew up with nothing, she knew how to let go. The man who always sought more power, more control, never could. There's a quiet moment in Order of the Phoenix when Harry reflects on Sirius's death. He's filled with rage, grief, confusion. But he doesn't lash out. Instead, he seeks understanding. He asks questions. He wants to know why Dumbledore kept secrets that thirst for truth over vengeance marked him apart. Voldemort would have unleashed fury. But Harry had been forced to process pain without release since childhood. He had learned to live with the ache, not feed it. That, too, was power. One of the most telling contrasts lies in how both characters treated death. Voldemort feared it above all things. His name was literally flight from death. He mutilated his soul to escape it. But Harry walked willingly into it, because he had learned that death was not the worst fate. A life without love, without loyalty, without self-respect, that was far worse. And that understanding came not from books or magical theory, but from a childhood where he had tasted quiet despair and survived it. In the end, Voldemort's downfall wasn't a spectacular duel or a clever spell. It was the slow, steady erosion of his power by someone who refused to become like him. When Harry told him, "Try for some remorse," it was perhaps the most powerful moment of the final battle. Not because it was magical, but because it was human. It was the last offer of redemption, the final bridge back to compassion. Voldemort sneered and rejected it, as he always had. But Harry, the boy from the cupboard, offered it anyway. That mercy was his greatest strength. The irony is sharp. Voldemort believed that power came from dominance, from bending the world to your will. But Harry had learned that true power comes from standing firm when the world tries to bend you. He had been bent before, bullied, beaten, belittled, but not broken. And that made him unbreakable in the face of the Dark Lord. Voldemort had magic, but Harry had meaning. He knew why he fought, who he fought for, and what he refused to become. So much of what was seen as Harry's weakness, the scars of his Muggle upbringing, became, in the end, the very thing that set him apart. While others were blinded by the glamour of magic, he remained grounded in reality. While others feared losing status or power, he only feared losing the people he loved. While others sought to escape their origins, Harry found strength in his. And in doing so, he became the one thing Voldemort never could understand, a wizard who chose humanity over supremacy. A boy who had every reason to hate and still chose to forgive. A young man who, because he had once been powerless, knew exactly how to use power when it was finally in his hands. Number 23, he listened to the misunderstood. In a world where greatness was often defined by power, bloodline, or prestige, Harry Potter's most quietly revolutionary trait was his ability to listen to those the world ignored. He didn't merely tolerate the voices of outsiders, he valued them, he trusted them, and he acted upon their words. This ability, subtle and human, became a defining weapon in the war against Voldemort, one that no spell could replicate. Time and again, Harry made choices others wouldn't, simply because he took seriously those who were dismissed as irrelevant, weak, or mad. In doing so, he turned misfits into allies and strangers into saviors. From the very first year at Hogwarts, Harry defied the expectations placed upon him by the magical society. He befriended Rubeus Hagrid, a half-giant groundskeeper with a troubled past and a wand snapped in half. Hagrid had been expelled from school and wrongly blamed for opening the Chamber of Secrets decades earlier. Others laughed at his accent, his clumsiness, and his unorthodox ideas about magical creatures. But Harry never saw him as lesser. He saw someone loyal and kind, someone who had saved him from the Dursleys and introduced him to magic. When the time came, it was Hagrid who carried Harry's dead body out of the Forbidden Forest. Only someone truly trusted would be given that role. "What's coming will come, and we'll meet it when it does," Hagrid once told him. And Harry believed him, not because of the wisdom of the words, but because of the soul that spoke them. Few others paid attention to ghosts or bothered with the strange tales they told, but Harry did. When he needed to find one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, he didn't go to the headmaster's portrait or to the ministry's archives. He turned to Helena Ravenclaw, the Grey Lady, a ghost long forgotten in the echoing corridors of Hogwarts. She revealed the tragic story of her stolen diadem, of betrayal and shame. "I stole the diadem," she confessed. "I sought to make myself cleverer, more important than my mother." Her words led Harry to the room of requirement, where the lost relic had waited in shadows. Most students never even looked Helena in the eyes, but Harry offered her empathy and got a crucial answer when time was slipping away. Even the strangest voices in the room found a place in Harry's world. Luna Lovegood, with her dreamy eyes and improbable beliefs, was the subject of mockery by many students. They called her loony, whispered behind her back, and dismissed her ideas as nonsense. But Harry didn't laugh. When Luna spoke of thestrals, creatures visible only to those who had seen death, he didn't scoff. He listened. She understood his grief when no one else did. Later, when Sirius Black died and the world seemed to close in, it was Luna who reminded him, "Things we lose have a way of coming back to us in the end, if not always in the way we expect." It wasn't just kindness, it was insight. Harry trusted that wisdom, and that trust made her an irreplaceable part of Dumbledore's army and the final battle. No one in the wizarding world gave house elves more than a second glance. They were servants, bound by ancient magic and invisible to most. But Harry saw Dobby. He saw a being with fear, courage, and love. When others treated the elf with indifference or condescension, Harry treated him with dignity. And Dobby returned that respect with unflinching loyalty. He defied the Malfoys, braved death to protect Harry, and ultimately gave his life to save him and his friends from the horrors of Malfoy Manor. It was Dobby, not a great aura or powerful wizard, who cracked the defenses of their prison and led them to freedom. As Harry buried him in the sand, carving the epitaph, "Here lies Dobby, a free elf," he honored not just the elf, but the belief that every voice mattered. When the prophecy loomed over him, when the ministry branded him a liar, and the world turned away, Harry leaned not on the powerful, but on the overlooked. Aberforth Dumbledore, the gruff and forgotten brother of Albus, offered refuge and a passage into Hogwarts at the darkest hour. Aberforth was never a part of the Order of the Phoenix's inner circle. He kept goats and insults, not secrets. Yet he had the insight that Albus lacked, an ability to see the cost of war on ordinary souls. "You're not doing this because you want to be a hero," Aberforth said. "You're doing it because you think it's right." And that was true. Harry listened, and the tunnel beneath the Hog's Head became the gateway to their last stand. Even Severus Snape, cloaked in bitterness and betrayal, was eventually heard. When Harry took Snape's memories at the end, he could have cast them aside in grief or rage, but he watched them. He felt the weight of a lifetime of sacrifice from a man the world hated. Snape had been the outsider for years, ignored by the Marauders, distrusted by both sides. But Harry saw what others had not, a broken heart beating beneath the cruelty. That understanding shifted everything. It told him that Voldemort was the true owner of the Elder Wand, not Harry. And because Harry believed it, because he acted upon it, Voldemort's final curse backfired. Trusting even the memories of an enemy turned the tide. In contrast, Voldemort silenced voices. He built his empire on fear and hierarchy. He tortured those who questioned, discarded those who failed. He laughed at the weak, banished the odd, and eradicated the different. He could never imagine that a house elf would shatter his plans or that a mad girl would inspire a leader. He underestimated them because he never listened. And in doing so, he left cracks in his fortress, small fissures Harry knew exactly how to slip through. Even minor characters shaped Harry's path because he heard them. When Harry visited Xenophilius Lovegood, father of Luna, it wasn't just out of obligation. He knew the man might hold truths no one else saw. Xenophilius spoke of the deathly hallows, a legend others dismissed as children's tales. Yet his cryptic words planted a seed, a question that led Harry to understand the deeper structure of Voldemort's ambitions and the meaning behind Dumbledore's final plan. In the battle of the Department of Mysteries, it was Neville Longbottom, once the shy, bumbling student, who stood tall beside Harry. While others overlooked Neville, Harry included him in every training session. He believed in him, and Neville rose to that belief. In the final battle, it was Neville who killed Nagini, the last Horcrux. That swing of the sword sealed Voldemort's fate. No prophecy had ever named Neville, but Harry had. He gave him a place in the story, and that changed everything. Perhaps no moment illustrated Harry's unique strength more than his final decision to walk into the Forbidden Forest knowing he would die. It wasn't the advice of a powerful wizard that led him there. It was the memory of Lily, the tears of Snape, the hope of Luna, the love of Hagrid, the loyalty of Dobby. All voices of those dismissed by the world, but not by Harry. They formed the compass that guided him to self-sacrifice. He walked alone, yet with them all behind him. Harry didn't seek out these people as tools or symbols. He found them, really saw them, and allowed their truths to shape his own. He didn't always understand them. Sometimes he doubted, but he listened. And in listening he turned walls into bridges, ghosts into guides, and castaways into comrades. When he chose to speak to nearly headless Nick about the afterlife, when he offered comfort to moaning Myrtle, or gave Creature the locket of Regulus Black, he wasn't just being kind, he was engaging with a world that others found inconvenient. These weren't just gestures, they were acts of trust, and that trust became power. In the end, Voldemort died not because Harry was the chosen one, but because he had chosen differently. He had chosen to see worth where others saw waste. He had chosen to listen when others dismissed. And because of that, when he stood alone in the ruins of Hogwarts, wand lowered, the world finally quiet, it wasn't just victory. It was proof that humility, empathy, and the courage to trust outsiders had reshaped destiny itself. Number 24. He used memories as a source of strength. Harry Potter never fought alone, though it may have seemed so. Behind his wand and scarred forehead stood an invisible army, an army of memories, not illusions, not ghosts, but burning fragments of love, loss, and loyalty. In the final battle against Lord Voldemort, it wasn't just skill or luck that kept Harry standing. It was the quiet, persistent echo of the past that fueled every choice he made. Voldemort believed that memories were a liability, a burden that only weakened one's resolve, but Harry, with all his scars and sleepless nights, knew better. He made memories into weapons. The first time Harry truly understood this power was at 13, on the banks of the Great Lake, as a swarm of Dementors threatened to suck the life from him and Sirius Black. At that moment, his Patronus, a brilliant silver stag, burst forth, saving them both. He had seen himself do it, yes, but more than that, he had conjured the strongest memory he possessed, the idea of his father standing there, proud and tall. The memory wasn't real in the traditional sense. James Potter hadn't been there. But in Harry's heart, his father's presence was vivid enough to give shape to the Patronus, a protective force fueled by pure emotion. "I knew I could do it this time," he told Hermione later, "because I'd already done it." The circular logic of time travel aside, what truly allowed him to cast the spell was the emotional energy summoned from memory. This pattern followed Harry through every year of his life at Hogwarts and beyond. In the Department of Mysteries, he saw Sirius fall through the veil and vanish. The shock nearly destroyed him. But even in grief, Harry carried Sirius with him. During his months of camping and hiding in the woods, hunted like prey, he would often recall Sirius's voice, his reckless grin, the way he had offered Harry a home. Those memories kept the loneliness at bay. When despair grew loud, the memory of Sirius reminded Harry that he had once been wanted, once been loved by someone who truly knew him. Voldemort couldn't understand this kind of strength. He saw attachment as weakness and love as a childish delusion, but Harry built his foundation on it. In the graveyard in Little Hangleton, when Voldemort returned in full strength, Harry found himself surrounded by enemies and corpses. Cedric had just been murdered. But as Priori Incantatem locked the wands together, the shadows of James and Lily, Cedric, and others began to emerge. They weren't real, perhaps, but they were more than illusions. Harry didn't panic. He stood his ground, whispered reassurances from the ghosts echoing in his mind. His father told him to run when the connection broke. His mother told him to be brave. These weren't just echoes from Voldemort's wand. They were memories reawakened, given form. Harry obeyed, not just because it made tactical sense, but because he felt surrounded by their presence. His next decisions were shaped by the moment he held their strength inside him. Later in The Half-Blood Prince, Harry experienced the pensive in a new way. He wasn't merely reading history, he was entering Dumbledore's curated collection of memories, seeing Voldemort as Tom Riddle, a child already twisted by neglect and cruelty. Harry absorbed these scenes not just as information but as understanding. He began to see the difference between his own grief and Voldemort's calculated detachment. Where Voldemort erased his past, Harry collected his treasured photographs, and each memory brought context, meaning, even wisdom. Dumbledore knew this too. Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love. These weren't empty words. They were seeds planted in Harry's conscience, growing each time he remembered them. In the forest, walking to his own death, Harry opened the snitch and found the resurrection stone. He turned it 3 times and saw them, James, Lily, Sirius, Remus. They walked with him, silent but present, bearing no resentment, only quiet pride. Harry didn't cry. He didn't hesitate. "You'll stay with me?" he asked them, though he already knew the answer. "Until the end," his mother said. But the truth was even more powerful. They had never left. Every moment of courage he showed, every refusal to give in, had been guided by the memories of their love. He reached Voldemort with peace in his heart, not because he wanted to die, but because the people who had once died for him now gave him the strength to do the same. Voldemort, in contrast, had no one. Not even Nagini was truly his companion. She was a tool. Every relationship he formed was based on fear, manipulation, or exploitation. When Bellatrix gazed at him with manic devotion, he never returned it. He severed every human connection that might have weakened his resolve. But in doing so, he amputated the very source of true strength. He could kill without remorse, but he could not love. He could possess minds, but not understand hearts. He believed Horcruxes would make him immortal, but never realized that Harry's loyalty, forged in memory and love, made him stronger than death. Even Snape, a man filled with bitterness and double loyalties, revealed his most vulnerable truth through a memory. "Look at me," he had whispered as he died. And later, in the pensive, Harry saw why. The image of Lily Evans, the girl Snape had loved his entire life, bloomed in the memories like a ghost never laid to rest. "After all this time?" Dumbledore had asked. "Always," Snape had answered. That single word carried more emotional weight than all the curses Snape had ever cast. It reminded Harry that even flawed people could be redeemed through memory. That pain, when carried with love, could become devotion. When Harry stepped into the great hall after the battle, surrounded by the fallen and the grieving, he didn't look away. He had lost Fred, Lupin, Tonks, but he stood tall. Because he remembered. He remembered how Fred had laughed, how Tonks had winked, how Lupin had taught him to fight the darkness with a Patronus. These recollections weren't distractions, they were his spine. Without them, he would have shattered under the weight of loss. Instead, he absorbed the pain and kept walking. And when Harry faced Voldemort for the final time in the courtyard, wand drawn, cloak billowing, he did not raise his voice. He simply told the truth. "Try for some remorse, Tom." It was not a taunt. It was a plea, born of everything Harry had learned from remembering Dumbledore, Snape, even Draco. Voldemort laughed. He would never understand that memories could be redemptive, but Harry had already won. Because he had not become a killer, because he had kept his heart intact, because he remembered. Even after victory, When he visited the ruined Hogwarts or looked into his son's eyes at King's Cross Station, Harry didn't try to erase the past. He named his children for the people who shaped him: James, Lily, Sirius, Severus, Albus. In each name, a story. In each story, a lesson. Memory was no longer just a defense, it was a legacy, and Harry guarded it fiercely. What Voldemort tried to conquer with fear, Harry overcame with memory. In the darkest moments, it was not power or spells that saved him, it was remembrance. He walked through pain with eyes open. He refused to forget, even when it hurt. And in doing so, he made the past a living force. His Patronus wasn't just a spell, it was his father. His courage wasn't just a trait, it was Sirius's love. His resolve wasn't just luck. It was Dumbledore's wisdom, Snape's sacrifice, Lily's protection. Voldemort never stood a chance against that kind of army. Harry Potter's greatest weapon was not the Elder Wand. It was his memory, his refusal to let go, his choice to carry the past not as a wound, but as armor. And when the final curse flew, it wasn't just him who faced it. It was everyone who had ever loved him, standing silently at his side. Number 25, he asked the questions no one dared to. Harry Potter never accepted things at face value, even when doing so would have made his life easier, safer, or less painful. From the very start, his path diverged from that of others, not because of destiny or prophecy, but because of a fierce determination to know the truth, no matter how inconvenient or dangerous that truth was. In his first year, when most 11-year-olds would be content enjoying magical feasts and flying lessons, Harry questioned why a three-headed dog was guarding a trapdoor in the forbidden corridor. While his classmates whispered rumors, he investigated. It was his relentless curiosity, shared with Hermione and Ron, that led to the discovery of the Philosopher's Stone's hiding place. Dumbledore never intended for Harry to be involved, yet Harry insisted on pursuing what others dismissed. "There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other," Rowling wrote, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them. But even deeper than friendship, what united the trio was the refusal to look away from what the rest of the school chose to ignore. In his second year, Harry confronted even greater horror with the opening of the Chamber of Secrets. While others believed the official version, that the monster was a myth or that Hagrid was responsible, Harry questioned everything. When he heard the basilisk's voice in the pipes, he didn't dismiss it as imagination. When Hermione was petrified, he followed the clues she left behind, trusting her. Intellect and pushing past his own fear. The professors, including McGonagall and Snape, avoided hard questions and focused on damage control, but Harry walked straight into the heart of the danger. He faced Tom Riddle, uncovered the truth about Ginny and the diary, and realized the chamber was real. It wasn't bravery in the conventional sense, it was an unwillingness to accept silence where answers were needed. Where others saw finality, Harry saw a crack, and he pushed until the whole wall came down. By the third year, his questions had evolved. Harry didn't just want to know what was happening, he wanted to understand the past. When he learned that Sirius Black had betrayed his parents, he didn't simply accept it. He demanded details. He asked Lupin questions that made the professor uncomfortable. He listened to overheard conversations and pieced together inconsistencies. Most tellingly, when the truth finally presented itself, when he stood in the shrieking shack, wand shaking in his hand, he didn't strike. He asked one final question. "Why didn't you kill me?" It was this moment of emotional risk, of choosing understanding over vengeance, that changed everything. He learned the truth about Peter Pettigrew, a man no one else thought to doubt. It was Harry's refusal to act blindly that saved a life, and nearly cost him his own. In his fourth year, Harry's questioning reached new depths. Thrust into the Triwizard Tournament against his will, he could have followed orders and played the part of the unwilling champion. But he needed to know who put his name in the Goblet of Fire. He interrogated every piece of the puzzle, from Barty Crouch's odd behavior to Snape's sudden hostility. When Rita Skeeter published lies, Harry didn't let it pass. When Mad-Eye Moody offered cryptic advice, Harry didn't just nod, he took notes and pushed further. The ministry, the media, and even his classmates avoided the truth, retreating into fear and denial. But Harry refused to play that game. In the final act of the tournament, he witnessed Cedric's murder, Voldemort's rebirth, and the Death Eater's return. He returned to Hogwarts battered and traumatized, but with the truth. He's back, he told Dumbledore, and even in his pain, he knew that truth had to be spoken, no matter the cost. Year 5 tested him more severely. Harry's desire for truth met open resistance. The ministry labelled him a liar. The Daily Prophet mocked him. Dolores Umbridge ruled Hogwarts with sadistic calm, silencing questions with rules, inspections and detentions. But Harry didn't stop. He questioned her authority. He organised Dumbledore's army. He trained students because he knew what no one wanted to admit. Voldemort had returned, and no one was preparing them for what was coming. Even Dumbledore disappointed him, refusing to meet his eyes. Refusing to answer the hardest question. Why had he been kept in the dark all summer? Yet Harry kept pushing. The truth hurt. It isolated him. It nearly killed him when he followed his vision to the Department of Mysteries. But there, again, the truth mattered. The prophecy, his connection to Voldemort, it all came into the light, not because someone gave it to him, but because Harry fought to uncover it. By his 6th year, Harry had learned how to press for answers with a sharper mind. He didn't just ask questions, he observed, calculated, and waited for the right moment. He asked Dumbledore why Slughorn's memory was tampered with. He probed Draco's behaviour when no one else saw anything suspicious. He used Felix Felicis not to stumble into luck but to draw out the truth. When he learned about Horcruxes, he asked Dumbledore the most chilling question of all: how many? He didn't want guesses, he wanted precision, detail, clarity. And when he saw that Dumbledore was dying, he didn't pretend otherwise. Harry stared directly into the abyss and asked what must be asked, even when the answers offered no comfort. In the final year, far from Hogwarts, Harry's questions only became more dangerous. Every step on their quest brought mysteries. What was the symbol in the tales of Beedle the Bard? Why did Dumbledore leave such cryptic instructions? Why did he trust Snape? Again and again Harry turned to the painful road of not knowing and kept walking. When he learned about the hallows, he didn't blindly chase power. He asked what they meant, how they fit, why Dumbledore had wanted him to know. He didn't worship the elder wizard. He challenged him even in death, demanding clarity. Perhaps those who are best suited to power are those who have never sought it, Dumbledore once said. Harry didn't seek power, but he sought truth, even when it shattered his understanding of those he loved. Most heartbreaking of all was the final truth he faced, that he was a Horcrux. No one told him, no one prepared him, but all the signs were there, and Harry pieced them together. He didn't scream or collapse. He accepted it. Then he walked into the Forbidden Forest to die, not for glory, not for prophecy, but because the truth required a price. Voldemort lived in illusion. He believed loyalty was fear, and truth was weakness. Harry lived in pain, loss, and unbearable truth, but he lived with open eyes. This difference shaped their fates. Voldemort rejected truth. He refused to believe that love protected Harry as a baby. He denied that Snape could be loyal to Dumbledore. He believed the Elder Wand obeyed him, even when every clue screamed otherwise. "There is nothing worse than death," he once said. But Harry had seen worse. He had asked the questions that led to that knowledge. He had felt grief, betrayal, doubt, and never turned away. Voldemort's downfall was not a matter of power or prophecy. It was his refusal to look. Harry survived because he wanted to know. He didn't stop at what was easy. He examined every stone on the path, even when it cut his hands. He asked what happened to Neville's parents. He asked why house elves were enslaved. He asked why the adults around him failed to act. He asked why Cedric died, why Sirius died, why Dumbledore lied. He asked what no child should have to ask, and he did it anyway. That hunger for truth gave him an edge Voldemort never understood. Even in battle, Harry relied on questions. At the Battle of Hogwarts, he demanded the truth from Aberforth. He confronted Voldemort with the truth of Snape's loyalty. He faced Narcissa Malfoy and knew not to fight, but to listen. He won not because he was the strongest wizard, but because he was the most open to understanding what others ignored. His questions cut deeper than any curse. In a world built on secrets, silence, and half-truths, Harry became dangerous because he refused to remain ignorant. Where others averted their gaze, he stared into the darkness. His victories were not gifts, they were earned through the painful, brave work of questioning. Every answer brought him closer to Voldemort, not to become like him, but to undo him. The greatest spell Harry ever cast wasn't with a wand, it was with his mind. He dismantled lies, cracked open half-truths, and dragged the hidden into the light. When Voldemort fell, it wasn't just because of a backfired curse or the Elder Wand's betrayal. It was because Harry had already defeated the one thing Voldemort could never conquer: the truth. Number 26. He didn't want to win, he wanted peace. Harry never stood at the edge of battle craving victory. He never raised his wand imagining glory. He didn't fantasize about defeating Voldemort in a grand spectacle of magic. He simply wanted peace. That was the paradox of the Chosen One. He never wanted to be chosen. While the wizarding world expected him to grow into a warrior, Harry remained a boy who craved normalcy, family, and safety. His heart ached not for triumph, but for silence, the silence of an orphan who wished the war would end, not for his sake, but so no one else had to die. When Voldemort killed Cedric Diggory, it wasn't just another life lost in the war. It shattered the idea that this fight had rules. It marked the moment Harry fully realized that Voldemort wasn't a man to be fought with honor, but a force that had to be stopped, not destroyed. Harry's unwillingness to pursue victory for its own sake set him apart from the man he was destined to defeat. Voldemort lived for conquest. He turned every relationship into a transaction, every ally into a pawn, and every enemy into a target. He sought immortality not just to escape death, but to cement domination. "There is nothing worse than death, Dumbledore," Voldemort once said. But Harry saw it differently. For him, death wasn't the ultimate defeat. It was sometimes a sacrifice made for love, for protection, for something greater. That truth was forged in the heart of a boy who had lost his parents to Voldemort's curse and whose godfather, Sirius Black, was ripped away before they could truly become a family. Harry didn't want revenge, he wanted the killing to stop. Time and time again, Harry chose mercy when others would have chosen vengeance. In the Department of Mysteries, when he and his friends faced the Death Eaters, Harry's first instinct wasn't to destroy, it was to protect. When he stunned Lucius Malfoy rather than curse him into oblivion, it wasn't weakness, it was control, it was choice. It was the act of someone who knew that becoming like the enemy meant losing what made him different. Voldemort would never hesitate. He would never spare. Harry, even in the darkest moments, held on to the light not because he was naive, but because he believed in something bigger than himself. The difference between Harry and Voldemort became clearest in the Forbidden Forest. Harry walked to his death, not seeking a final duel, but ready to die to save everyone else. He didn't know if he'd survive, he didn't ask for help, he didn't beg for escape, he simply accepted the burden. That was his strength. While Voldemort clung to life through Horcruxes and dark rituals, Harry gave his life willingly. "Does it hurt?" he asked his mother's shade as he walked into death's arms. The bravery wasn't in fighting, it was in surrendering. It was in understanding that winning didn't always mean surviving. Sometimes it meant letting go. That act of self-sacrifice wasn't a strategic move. It wasn't part of a clever plan, it was the embodiment of his values. Harry had seen Dumbledore fall, he had watched Snape die, he knew Fred, Remus, Tonks, and they had all been lost. Yet he never allowed hatred to harden him, he never allowed the bloodshed to define his purpose. He kept going not because he wanted to win, but because someone had to stand between Voldemort and the rest of the world. He was the shield, not the sword. When he finally faced Voldemort in the Great Hall, it wasn't a duel in the traditional sense. It was an ending. Harry didn't want the Elder Wand. He didn't want power. "I've had enough trouble for a lifetime," he said when Ron and Hermione asked about keeping it. That moment defined him more than any spell he cast. Voldemort had murdered, manipulated, and maimed to obtain the Elder Wand, believing it would make him invincible. Harry, in contrast, snapped it in two and threw it away, because power meant nothing to him without peace. Victory meant nothing without justice. Voldemort was obsessed with the idea of defeating death. He created Horcruxes to anchor himself to life, to ensure he could never be outmatched. Yet in doing so, he became less than human. Harry, on the other hand, embraced mortality. He knew death could be noble. That understanding came from Lily Potter's sacrifice, from Dumbledore's teachings, and even from watching his friends step forward to fight. He saw death not as a curse, but as a companion to love. It was this acceptance that gave him the courage Voldemort lacked. There is something inherently tragic about Voldemort's end, not because he died, but because he never understood why he lost. In the final moments, he didn't see the flaw in his thinking. He still believed Harry's refusal to kill made him weak, but it was Harry's restraint that gave him strength. It was his refusal to become what he hated that allowed him to remain whole. Voldemort's soul was shattered because he had poured it into objects. Harry's soul remained intact because he had poured it into people. Even Harry's relationship with Draco Malfoy reveals the depth of his conviction. He had every reason to hate Draco. They were rivals, enemies even, for years. But when the moment came, when the fiend fire consumed the room of requirement, Harry saved Draco's life. Not because Draco deserved it, but because Harry wasn't Voldemort. He wouldn't let someone die if he could prevent it. That wasn't about being noble. It was about being decent. In a war that had stolen so much, kindness became a radical act. Neville Longbottom, another boy marked by tragedy, once said, "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends." Harry's bravery lay in standing up to the world's expectations. Everyone wanted him to be a hero, to destroy, to avenge. But Harry stood firm. He followed his own path even when it was painful, even when it meant losing what he loved. He was never the soldier others hoped for. He was something rarer, a protector. The Triwizard Tournament revealed another layer of his nature. When Harry and Cedric touched the cup together and Cedric was murdered in cold blood, Harry's return wasn't a celebration, it was grief. And in that grief, Harry didn't plot revenge, he warned the world. He shouted the truth even when no one believed him. He didn't care about being right, he cared about stopping Voldemort before more lives were lost. That unwavering focus on others was his greatest weapon, and it never left his side.